A Packers offseason with no drama? We made it. Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Yeah, I know the Super Bowl still has to happen, but it's pretty much the offseason. Grassi, and today we are going to be breaking down what is going to be happening next with the Green Bay Packers heading into this offseason, because while there is no drama, especially compared to the past few years, there are still some things that the Packers need to take a look at. Of course, number one is going to be extending and signing him to a new contract. Our QB1, Mr. Jordan Love, that's going to be the top of all things. We're going to take a look at some impending free agents, look at guys like David Bakhtiari, what's going to happen with him, take a look at what we could do in the draft, and overall, just kind of a roadmap of what to expect these next few months. And so let's get started with the number one most important thing, and that is Jordan Love.
Do you believe in love after love?
Now, Jordan Love did receive a little bit of an extension last year, which kind of bridged the gap between, hey, we're going to pick up his fifth-year option. What is that going to look like? And it basically just gave Jordan Love a whole bunch of incentives, a lot that he wound up meeting in order to play this season. Heading into next season, there's no shot that Jordan Love takes a snap on this current contract, because right now he's on his final year, and on top of that, he's due about $11 million. So yeah, there's no starting quarterback in the NFL that would take a contract that low. And so instead, we're going to take a look at what this contract could be. I would not be surprised if it's around a 4-year deal, because while Jordan Love has technically been in the league since 2020, of course, he only had 1 full year as a starter last year. However, his stats were pretty damn freaking good and has definitely warranted a new contract. I don't expect him to be the highest paid quarterback or anything like that, but I imagine a 4-year deal that will roughly average around $45 million a year. That would make him a top 10 QB in terms of pay, and I think that would make Jordan Love very happy. I imagine there's going to be a bunch of incentives added on to that as well, but ultimately, this is actually a great news for the Packers because they're able to lock in their QB1 at a relatively good price, and of course, if he does incredibly well, the Packers, 1, don't have to break the bank, and 2, he will still be up for another contract extension in around 4 years. So I imagine that's what the contract is going to look like, anywhere between like 43 and maybe 47, $48 million a year, on average is what I'm guessing. But it is really nice to not have any QB drama, and that is kind of the biggest decision the Packers have to make this offseason. Something that Goody has already said, that Jordan Love is our guy and we are going to build around him. So the hardest part is done. Now it just comes down to money. However, there are some other contracts that are not as easy. You look at Aaron Jones, for example, and Goody has said that he wants Aaron Jones back. So I imagine Aaron Jones, who took a pay cut to stay in Green Bay, they're going to have to rework his deal. And I think that's definitely worth it because Aaron Jones, when he's on the field, is one of the best running backs in the game. Now, of course, he suffered a whole bunch of injuries this year, and that really sucked. But when he was on the field, especially in the playoffs, you could not overestimate his value. He was just so damn good. And of course, he carries the G and wants to stay in Green Bay. So I imagine maybe a 2 to 3 year deal is going to get worked out for Aaron Jones because he is getting up there in age. But as last year showed, when he's on the field, you just can't beat it. On top of that, there was a whole bunch of rumors this past season about Jair Alexander. Of course, you had the whole coin flip debacle, and he went out there, got suspended for a week. But Matt LaFleur and Goody have both come out saying, nope, Jair is not going anywhere. I don't imagine he's going to get traded. He played pretty damn well in the playoffs as well. And while he didn't have his greatest season this year, Jair Alexander is still one of the best corners in the league, and I don't think he's going anywhere. However, the one contract that a lot of people are worrying about is David Bakhtiari, our all-pro left tackle. David Bakhtiari, unfortunately, has been struggling with this knee issue that stems all the way back to New Year's Eve years ago, and it has just been a nightmare for him. And I feel really bad for David Bakhtiari because he's an incredible player. He's one of the best left tackles in the game when he's on the field. It's just that he can't be on the field, and I know how incredibly frustrating that is for him. He did a huge article with Cheesehead TV a few years back that just demonstrated all the lengths that he is going through to try and get back on the field. And Goody talking about this in his press conference, they kind of just see it as like we're still waiting on David Bakhtiari if that's going to work out. if David Bakhtiari is going to stay, they are going to have to rework his deal. I mean, right now, he's nearly a $40 million cap hit. He is the highest contract by far that the Packers are currently holding on to. And if the guy can't play, it's going to be tough to justify it. And I love David Bakhtiari and I love him on the Packers, but we're going to have to see what his health looks like. The offensive line did a pretty damn good job this season. I know it struggled mid-season. And if David Bakhtiari was ready to play, it'd be awesome. We wouldn't have to worry about our blind side for a little bit. But depending on contract issues and, of course, the health of David Bakhtiari, I wouldn't be surprised the Packers moved on from him, whether that is in the form of a release or if there's a team that really wants and could trade for him.
I had a sheet of paper when I met with the Jets, and I said, sign these people.
But again, that's going to come down to his current health. So David Bakhtiari is probably the biggest question mark this offseason on what the Packers are going to do. And yeah, it might lead to some tough decisions. However, some pieces of good news is all these teams right now are talking about their impending free agents. And the Packers, they have a few impending free agents. For example, they have Yosh Nijman, they have Keyshawn Nixon, Darnell Savage, A.J. Dillon, Bo Melton. And quite honestly, that puts the Packers in an amazing position because there's definitely a few guys I wouldn't mind them re-signing. For example, Darnell Savage, he has struggled throughout the years, but had himself a pretty darn good season. Yosh Nijman's always nice to fill in. However, the Packers don't really utilize him anymore. Bo Melton, I imagine, is going to get a deal as he was great down the stretch. And A.J. Dillon, what are we going to do about A.J. Dillon? In that he's played pretty well. He didn't have the worst season this year. However, I don't know if that justifies a brand new contract. And if it does, I don't imagine it's going to be very high. So it'll be really interesting to see what we do with A.J. Dillon. And if we don't re-sign him, I imagine the Packers are going to be looking for a running back in the draft. But overall, there aren't any free agents that are so glaring that, oh man, we need to find the money to pay these guys to try and make it work. Instead, it seems like there's going to be a lot of restructuring for guys that are currently on the roster, like an Aaron Jones. And if there are any free agents that we want to keep, I imagine they're going to be relatively cheap. And that brings us to our cap space. The Packers cap space is not great right now. Currently, they are over the cap a bit. However, according to our friend Ken Ingalls over on Twitter, and who's been on the show a bunch of times, he's saying the Packers could make some significant moves, including things with David Bakhtiari that could definitely allow the Packers to have some play money, around $50 million if they made all these moves. Not that they have to, but at least it's an option. And again, David Bakhtiari, it's going to be really interesting what they do with that contract. But the Packers are going to have some money to play around with, and that's going to get even better in 2025. But in a year where the Packers were basically rebuilding last year, and then they go, oh wait, we have our guy, and they made it to the divisional round, the Packers are in a great spot here. Because whether they want to be aggressive in free agency or not, for example, looking at safety, and the safety class for free agents right now is looking pretty darn good, the Packers are going to have the luxury and ability to do that and go after guys that they want. And if they don't want to go into free agency, they can look at the draft. Because right now, the Green Bay Packers have 11 draft picks, and they have 5 in the top 100 picks. With 2 second-rounders and 2 third-rounders, they have the flexibility not only to trade up and get the guys that they want, but as Goody also indicated, they won't be afraid to trade some of those picks to fill some positions of need. And for the Packers, I've said this a few times now, this is an awesome scenario to be in. It's a super young team. You look at our wide receiver core and where there are holes, especially in the secondary, safety, potential corner, some O-line depth, there's things that they could definitely address, but the Packers are in a great position. They're not going to be completely loaded with cash, but they're not going to be strapped for cash either. They're going to have flexibility in the draft, and after they figure out some of their key contracts like Jordan Love, David Bakhtiari, and Aaron Jones, they are going to be fielding a very similar team that they had last year, except now there'll be new additions from the draft and also potential free agent acquisitions that are going to help this team get even better. And so ultimately for the Packers, obviously there's going to be expectations for this coming season that are going to be higher than they were last year. But if Jordan Love continues to improve and that roster of really young talent just gets even better, I mean, the Packers are going to be a good football team. Of course, Joe Barry is no longer on the team, so with a new defensive coordinator, it'll be interesting to see if he can utilize the talent that we've had on that side of the ball for so long. And the offense with Tom Clements staying, yeah, the ceiling is really, really high for the Packers. And while this might not be the splashiest offseason, I think what this is going to be doing is securing our future and building around it. You're building around Jordan Love. You're building around the young core roster that we have, so the Packers will be competitive for years to come. And if they fall short of their goals next season, 2025 is going to be even better in terms of cap space. And from there, they can be really aggressive if they want to. And overall, this offseason, yeah, it's looking pretty good for the Pack. I'll be doing videos later on this offseason, especially as we get closer to free agency, about what free agents I'd like to bring in, what areas of need the Packers really need to target in the draft and in free agency. But for right now, things are looking pretty good, and it's damn good to be a Packers fan. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. You know, I saw me at Tom Grossi County. All social media is see down below. A big shout and thank you to all the patrons and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.